I love technology. I'm actually not here as a growth hacker. I think that Morten asked me to come here more as a business hacker. And the reason why he asked me is because I have a bit of experience from the venture capital side of the table. Basically, I started out as doing a lot of things, and I ended up in venture capital starting around 2002, and then until 2013, I was basically part of the team that built, spun out from Vex Fund and grew a venture capital investor called Sunstone Capital, where I was involved in making a number of investments, working with investments, making a huge number of mistakes, hopefully not dying from them, and learning from others' mistakes as well. And what I'm here to do is to try to give you a bit of insight from my time at Sunstone, examples from a few companies, and how I'm trying to apply them to my own startup company, which I co-founded 3 years ago, and try to avoid some of the mistakes that I've seen and made earlier on. So it's not a very technically driven presentation. It's more about business and even structuring companies, but I'll try to make it interesting, and I hope I don't take too long. I'm going to see the timer advancing, and I will start to speak faster and faster as this presentation progresses. If I speak too fast, someone raise your hand. Tell me to slow down. I'm also kind of excited about what I've been doing, what I'm doing, so I talk a lot about it. A couple slides about Homemate and what it is. Question here. I assume that most people here are kind of into technology. How many people here like food? All right, that's good. We're combining both. And I love and I'm driven by combining the digital world with the physical world, and it's nothing better than food. And this is one of the reasons why we're here today, and this is our own problem, and that's that one thing that we don't have enough of in this world is time. And we end up doing this and feeding this to our kids. And we were just sitting with some friends and talking about, it can't be real, this can't be true, we have to be able to do something better. And that was what Homemate came up with. Basically, what we're selling is relief. It's a food product, but we're selling relief, relief from the guilt of eating crappy food, relief from the stress of having to plan what you're having for dinner tonight. It doesn't mean every night, but at least a couple of nights a week. And relief from the guilt of not even having time to spend time with your family and your friends. That's what we're selling. This is what relief looks like for us. Basically, the whole concept is very simple. It's restaurant quality, ready to cook food. Basically, we're going to the local market. We spun out of the local market, actually. We're getting all the ingredients, getting everything ready, cutting it, putting it into a metal tray. You put it in the oven for 15 minutes and you cook it yourself. You even baked your own bread. So a quarter of an hour and you get a fresh made restaurant quality meal right out of your own oven. That's what we're doing. The concept idea basically is to keep our ingredients separated as long as possible and then put them together in our physical locations, which are shops. We have 9 of them now, so that you have the most fresh experience and we minimize waste at the same time. The business idea is to combine physical shops with a digital business. Physical shops, for us, are not just, we look like a walk-up shop. We look like your mom and pop food shop around the corner. For us, we see them as not just a place where we interact with our customer, where we get feedback and give input to our customers, but we're a customer support center, a service center, and we also see our shops as nodes on a distribution network in an e-commerce company, because we're shortening the distance for the last mile as we grow and start to move into the e-commerce side of our business, which has been the goal from the very beginning. We're looking at data, and I use words data-driven. In our minds, we're data-driven from the beginning, and everything else comes after that. On that note, if there are any really good CRM people, give me a call afterwards. This is what one of our shops looks like inside. We're trying to give someone an experience at the home as if it's their own kitchen, and they walk into it, they should feel like they're walking into their own kitchen, and it should be easy just to be very spontaneous. That's really it about my company. There's a lot more, but I think tasting is believing. Morten, when he wrote me and said, "This, come present, we're going to have pizza afterwards," I said, "What?" So you're not having pizza afterwards, you're having Homemate. And hopefully there's enough for everyone here. And as soon as my colleague shows up as well, I hope that it'll be a good experience. If you like it, really, really great. If there's something you don't like, write me and tell me, please. Feedback. But tasting is believing. You have some brochures a flyer on your chairs to tell you basically what our concept is, and then there's a little card. If you use it by the end of the month and you sign up online and order online, you'll get a 20% discount off the first order. We have 9 locations located around the city and north of the city as well. And we're having the grand opening of number 9 tomorrow at Magasin Melvin, which is in Kongens Nytorv, downstairs. And we're having a big party tomorrow afternoon starting 3 o'clock. Organic champagne, live jazz, tastings. This is why I'm here. And now I'm going to give you a few examples of some companies that I've worked with in the past. This is kind of confidential. We'll record it, and then afterwards I'll see how much I actually talk because I have a hard time making myself shut up. And then we'll see if we have to edit out anything. It's nothing, no rocket science. But I'm just curious here, how many people, are there any people here who are with the press? Anyone with the press? Okay, are there any investors here who are currently active investors? Good. I'm going to talk about 3 companies here that I've been involved with in my venture career. And I'll talk about my personal experiences and personal mistakes. It's not a reflection on where I was or anything else, but the things that I've learned and what I've tried to implement across my career. First one is a company called Zensys. There's an ancient VC proverb. I don't know if you've heard this before, but if there's one thing worse than driving a bus off a cliff, it's being in the back seat while somebody else drives it off the cliff. And this was one of the first investments that I made that I was responsible for. Basically, it was a very complicated investment, and I'll talk just about a couple things that went wrong, things that we could predict and things that I couldn't predict, but that I learned from. One of the things that I could have predicted if I'd had experience was that when we went into this investment, it had many share classes. It was already an older investment. There were other dominating investors in there. We went in there with a big amount of money and a small amount of influence, and 4 or 5 share classes because there was liquidation preference and anti-dilution and all sorts of funny stuff. The reality was that when you start introducing share classes in an investment, you make it more and more complicated because whenever a new investor comes in, they want to have the best deal. It ended up being so complicated that no human could even program, a machine to calculate how you should distribute proceeds from that company. That was one of the big learnings from this thing. The second one also was that you just don't know what to expect because this is a company that was selling wireless mesh networking technologies it's called Z-Wave, it still exists today, into the home residence area. We invested in 2003. They were building up on a nice revenue ramp, $1 million, $4 million on the ramp to do $7 million in 2007-8, $10 million. I don't know if any of you were around and professionally active in 2007 and 8, but this little thing called the financial crisis hit. And we were selling into the real estate market. We had $10 million worth of customers. A whole bunch of them disappeared overnight. And when I say disappeared, I don't mean they stopped being customers. I mean they disappeared. And this is where you just don't know what's going to happen. Another thing that happened was that because of this, the last investor, who was an American VC who was at the top of the liquidation stack, they made a principled decision to get out of all silicon deals as fast as possible. And because they were at the top of the lick stack, even though they didn't have a big amount of money, they wanted us to sell the company and sell it for whatever we could get because they would get most of it. So it's about aligning incentives also. That was Boost. Zensys, sorry. Next one is Boost. I hope we've got enough time here.
We have 7 minutes
left. Oh, man. All right. Boost is an e-commerce company that I led the seed investment to in 2009. When there were 7 employees and there were no revenues. They just listed in May. I was at the IPO in Stockholm, and they're profitable, they're growing strong, and their market cap is 4.25 billion SEK today. So it's been an okay investment and a great return. It's been a massive roller coaster. The one thing I just want to mention is that in the middle of 11, we were hit by a perfect storm of everything going wrong. We did a massive pivot in the company because we started out with one business model, had to go to another. We lost a major investor and commercial partner, and I brought in another investor and brought them in as a commercial partner also, and then we did a big pivot. In the middle of 11, I remember when the CEO called me and said, Eric Allen, we just lost our major customer, which was 95% of our revenues at that time. And he said, oh, fuck. And I said, I'll call you back in 30 minutes. And I hung up, and I thought, and I called him back and I said, listen, there's no way this is going to stop us. You'll see this is the best thing that ever happened to us. And then we went on a different kind of journey, which became a massive roller coaster with other mistakes made, but we fixed a lot of things, and it turned out that it was the best thing that ever happened to the company because they wouldn't be there today if the first customer had not left them. And this is all about lemons and lemonade and whatever, but I'll come back to that and tell you about some lessons learned there. Last one is a company called FLATFROG, which I would say is probably one of the oldest startups in the world. It's a company that started out, and actually I led the investment way back when it was not called FLATFROG, it was not called a company. Somebody came with a patent, and I helped them build this big business model and plan around it, and then I raised money from some different investors, and it had a different name, and then everything went wrong. And if someone buys me a big beer in a long time, I'll tell you about it. Lots of lessons learned there. But what's interesting about this company, though, the only thing I want to talk about is the pivoting. because we've pivoted 4 or 5 times in this company, and they're finally hitting it. This is an old startup. It's been around for a long time, and one of the reasons why they're there, another reason why Boost is still there, is because the investors that I focused on bringing in as much as possible are long-term investors who don't have a closed-end fund structure, because sometimes things take longer. In fact, most times things take longer and more money than you expect. We started out doing a small optic-based touch display. This is back in before 2007, before iPhone was announced. And then we went to a big display, and then we brought in Intel as an investor and went down to build displays for laptops, and then that killed the market in laptops. Then we went for bigger displays, and now they're doing 84-inch, the world's best quality, very, very inexpensive collaboration systems with their technology plus some really great cloud-based collaboration software. And this is where they're finally hitting it. And they went, they did $1 million in revenues and then $4 million in revenues, and they're doing 5 times that plus this year. And so they're on a ramp, which is kind of nice. But it took a long time. All these things that I'm trying to pull together, I'll pull into a couple of proverbs and things that I put together. 4 minutes, 10 points, 4 minutes. Ways to avoid battle scars on Homemate, I hope. We're still a startup. We're on a growth. We just brought new investors, so I'm not looking for capital yet. But we're still a startup. And things can happen. Financial crises can happen. Nuclear war can happen. Whatever, we don't know. One thing that I would just say for everyone, and this is a company hack, to the extent you can, in my own opinion, keep it to one share class. And I'll tell you more about that later on. Align incentives across investors, and I'm a big believer in this, and a bunch of very famous VCs don't believe this. I'm just one guy. But at least Boost and FLATFROG followed this, and if I hadn't done it, they would both be gone today. Patient long-term investors, I mentioned that. For me, it's very important. Also, that I trust and that I know. Most of my investors in Homemate I met along my career. In fact, the recent investor, Klaxfund, that was just announced in the paper yesterday, the CEO of Klaxfund was the chairman of Zensus back in the day. So I've been trying to keep contact with people along my career, and as long as you have a credibility and they know and trust you, you can work well together. I'll come back more about investors and how I work with them. Product market fit and unit economics before you scale. Really, really important. I've seen some other growth hackers presentations saying the same thing. Very, very important. I hope we waited, long enough and we acted early enough on this, because we just brought in a lot more investors. We built a big production kitchen to get capacity, and we're working to scale now. So we're taking a bit more risk, but we're doing it in a controlled way, which I hope is controlled enough, and we're really excited. When you suddenly discover you're walking through hell, what do? The answer is you keep going. Panic doesn't do any good, and I think maybe I have the fortune that you can't see many scars here, but I've seen everything, and if I hadn't made every mistake in the book, someone next to me has. And when you've seen so much stuff going wrong all the time from every direction, you start to realize that we'll get by everything. And that's why this is one of my big things I think it's important as an entrepreneur, is that every disaster that happens, figure out where the blessing in disguise is in it, because there's something good that happened in it. Something like this happened in Homemate last week. I'll talk about it in 2 years. Hopefully as a lesson learned that we fixed and did well. But I'm actually very positive, and I'm more excited now than I was last week. So it really depends on how things happen here. But choose your metaphor, lemons, lemonade, whatever, but remain optimistic. This is probably what would make me a crappy investor and hopefully a good entrepreneur. Luckily, my investor track record is pretty good, but investors are portfolio managers. And I think we need to look at individual companies for achievement here. Know when not to stop. It's impossible to know. But any rational investor probably would have taken Boost and cut the losses when they lost their customer and 95% of their revenues in 11. I saw a great management team, a huge market, a great opportunity here, and thought this is just crazy. We've got to be able to pull this through and do it better. When you've got the right people, you can do anything. From an entrepreneur perspective, and luckily I think for Sunstone, we kept going. But it's impossible to know. And even after this, I made mistakes along the way. I was probably too optimistic, but we fixed things and we moved along. Know when to pivot. This is a corollary of know when not to stop. Sometimes you'll never really know afterwards if it was the right time until you've done it. But sometimes you just have to be able to call it and say, this is it. Sunk cost behind us. It's not working. We've got to start over. In FLATFROG, we didn't just pivot. We built new technology platforms. We kept the patents and accumulated them, but we actually had to start from scratch again and do new platforms, which took a long time, a year and a half. And then we finally hit it. But if you really believe in the market and what you're doing and the people you have around the table, and you've got the investors to back you up, then it's okay sometimes to take a massive sidestep. Almost done. Firefighters, get them around you. These are the people that run into the fire and that don't run away. For me, this goes along with your investors. If you have investors who, when things start to go bad, start to run away from the fire, then they're the wrong investors. This is why it's very important when you talk to investors, don't just talk to them, talk to entrepreneurs they've invested in. Especially talk to entrepreneurs that did not go well. Because it's when things don't go well that you see the true nature of somebody's character. And that's where you really need to do due diligence on your investors as well. Because when things go well, everyone loves everybody. It's in adversity that you actually see what someone's like. And when you've got investors, you're getting married for 10 years. So be careful about that. Company before ego. Just make sure that everyone is irreplaceable. I'm doing my best right now to make sure that I've been a single point of failure, and now I'm pulling in my team to build out the team so that I actually can get hit by a bus and everything is okay. In fact, I've said to my investors that I need to be able to be hit by a bus, not that I want to. Everything before ego. It's the last thing I want to just put out there, because I think humility and integrity are some of the most important aspects we can have. And too many people I meet in different parts of the world are kind of forget this. And I think humility is an important thing, because it doesn't matter how fast you succeed or how much you succeed. You're still human, and you will still make mistakes. Admit it, move on. Everyone learns from it. And integrity, just keep your word, do what you say. And if you start to go down the path of not having integrity, people won't trust you for anything. So just try to stay honest and keep doing the same thing. That's really it, kind of high level. If you want more details, come find me afterwards. There's so many more battle scars I haven't even gotten into here. But that was really the main thing. So I hope you enjoy the food. I hope you enjoy the rest of this presentation. And I hope this was at least a little bit interesting for you. Thanks.